Welcome, dear listeners. Before we begin this journey into the unknown, I kindly ask that you take a moment to like and subscribe. Your support means more than you know as we explore the darkest corners of fear together. In the deepest corners of the city, there exists a place known only by those who speak of strange and forbidden things. A restaurant, hidden far down a crooked alley, its location so obscure that even locals often forget it exists. Until, that is, someone mentions the name, the Cursed Table. The mere mention of it brings shivers to the bravest souls, for those who dare speak of it share whispered tales of its dark power. But the question that lingers most, why does anyone go there? I suppose I had asked myself the same question, but curiosity can be a powerful thing, pulling you toward danger even when you know you shouldn't get too close. I had heard the stories, rumors about strange occurrences, customers vanishing, people walking out forever changed, but I didn't believe them. Not entirely. At least not until I found myself standing in front of its weathered door one stormy evening, drawn by something I couldn't explain. The wind howled through the narrow alley, carrying with it a whisper, like the voice of something ancient beckoning me forward. The street was empty, eerily so, as if the city had swallowed itself whole, leaving only the darkened alley and the faint glow of the Cursed Table's sign. The neon letters flickered weakly, casting a ghostly green glow over the wet cobblestones. I hesitated for just a moment, feeling the weight of the stories pressing against me like an unseen force. But my hand moved on its own, pushing open the heavy wooden door. The restaurant was exactly as the stories described: dim, quiet, and unsettling. The dim light from the old chandeliers did little to chase away the shadows that clung to the corners of the room. The walls were lined with dark, aged wood that seemed to absorb sound, making the place feel unnaturally silent. The patrons sat at their tables in near complete stillness, faces hidden in the soft, flickering light. It was as though the room itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. I stepped further inside, the door closing behind me with a soft creak. The air smelled of something ancient, like dust mixed with the faint scent of wet stone. My footsteps felt heavier as I approached the counter, and I had the strange sensation that I was no longer walking by my own will. A tall waiter appeared from behind the counter, his face thin and gaunt, his eyes too sunken to be anything but unsettling. He didn't ask for my name or reservation. He simply nodded, a slow, deliberate motion, before turning and leading me deeper into the room. I followed without question, though my heart was starting to race. I had heard of the Cursed Table, of course. Everyone who knew the stories had. The legends all pointed to one particular table at the heart of the restaurant. There were those who said the table had a dark history, that it was cursed by a vengeful spirit, or perhaps by something even worse. People who sat there would see things, hear things, and sometimes they wouldn't return at all. My table was small, tucked into a corner where the dim light barely reached, but my eyes kept drifting to the center of the room. There it was, the Cursed Table. It was larger than the others, its surface covered in deep, jagged scratches. The wood looked warped, like it had been twisted and tormented by unseen hands. The seats around it were empty, but I felt an undeniable presence lingering there, as if something or someone was watching me. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to look away, but I couldn't. A glass of water appeared in front of me. I hadn't seen the waiter return, but there it was, placed carefully on the old wooden table. "The special tonight is Cursed Delight," he said softly, barely more than a whisper. His voice sounded brittle, like something old and forgotten, worn down by centuries of silence. I nodded, too unsettled to argue. As he disappeared back into the shadows, I glanced around the room. The other patrons remained eerily still, their faces obscured by the flickering light. Were they watching me, or had they, like me, been drawn here by something far darker than curiosity? I tried to distract myself by focusing on the sound of the rain outside, the occasional drip of water onto the old wooden floor, but my mind kept returning to the table in the middle of the room. Something was wrong with it. I could feel the energy pulsing from it like a heartbeat, slow and steady, as though the table itself was alive. The shadows around it seemed thicker, darker, and every so often, I thought I saw a shape, tall and thin, lurking just beyond the edges of my vision. My breath caught in my throat. I was being watched. I knew it. Suddenly, the room grew colder. The temperature dropped so quickly that my breath formed small clouds of mist in front of me. The whispers began then, soft at first, like a breeze, but growing louder, filling the room with disembodied voices. They spoke in a language I didn't understand, their words swirling around me, making my skin prickle. I looked back at the cursed table, and that's when I saw it. A figure sat there now, a dark, shadowy shape that hadn't been there before. It was hunched over the table, its back bent in an unnatural way, its long, bony fingers drumming against the scarred wood. The figure was cloaked in darkness, no face visible, no features. Just an emptiness, like a black hole where a person should be. My heart pounded in my chest, every instinct telling me to run, but my legs felt frozen to the floor. The whispers grew louder, and the lights flickered. The figure at the table slowly turned its head toward me, though it had no eyes that I could see. But I felt its gaze. I felt it deep in my soul, as if it were reaching inside me, pulling at my very being. The air around me became thick, suffocating, and the walls seemed to close in. The restaurant itself felt alive, its dark energy pressing against me, trapping me inside. I wanted to leave, to escape, but I couldn't move. The figure at the cursed table began to rise, its movements slow and deliberate. It stood unnaturally tall, its limbs long and spindly, like a spider crawling out of its web. It took a step toward me, its body moving with a strange, jerky rhythm, as though it were being controlled by some invisible force. The shadows around it seemed to writhe and twist, almost as if they were alive. My breath came in short, panicked gasps as the figure drew closer. The room began to shake, the floorboards creaking under the weight of something far more ancient than the building itself. I could hear the sound of glass breaking, dishes rattling, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the shadowy figure. It was inches from me now, its long fingers reaching out, its presence so cold that it burned. Just as the figure's hand reached for me, the waiter appeared at my side, his face pale and twisted with fear. "You have to go," he hissed, his voice shaking. "It's already begun. You were never meant to sit here." With all the strength I could muster, I forced my body to move. I stumbled to my feet, my legs trembling as I bolted toward the door. The figure let out a low, guttural sound, something between a growl and a moan, that sent a wave of terror crashing over me. The whispers turned into screams, high-pitched and deafening, filling the room with a cacophony of voices. I slammed into the door, pushing it open with all my might, and burst into the cold, rain-soaked night. The whispers faded into the distance as I stumbled down the alley, my heart racing, my mind reeling from what I had just witnessed. When I finally turned around, the alley was empty. The restaurant was gone. The cursed table had disappeared, as though it had never been there at all. But the whispers remained. Even now, as I stand in the safety of my own home, I can still hear them. Faint, but persistent.